YouTube. I don't get the viewing figures. Um, uh, at least certain people view the video when I've done it, 40 to 50. I'd like this to reach as many possible people as possible, please. So people who see this and like the content, please, like the video, and if possible, share it, repost it, whatever, blah, 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 to get this out and about. It needs to. It needs to. People need to know this truth. Okay. Um, it's to do with slavery. Okay. Hello, Charlie. God bless you. So it's to do with slavery from the Bible's point of view and from the Quranic point of view. As I say, this is something that people need to realise, wake up to, and start to, understand this big sin. In the Bible, slavery is a sin. You can find that out from Genesis chapter 9. Genesis chapter 9, where Noah's son goes and sees him naked, and then he calls his other two brothers to come and witness it, and his other two brothers cover their father up. And of course, then when Noah wakes up from his drunken stupor and realizes what his first brother Ham did, he curses his son Canaan and says, "Your son Canaan will now forever be a servant of servants." In other words, he'll be a slave because of the sin that you did. We can also see this as well in Daniel chapter 9. In Daniel chapter 9, Daniel prays to God. And prays to God for forgiveness because he realizes that his sins and all the other Israelites' sins and all the children of Israel who turned away from God and continued to keep sinning is the cause of them being taken into captivity by Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. And so Daniel is praying, for the Lord to forgive them for their sin, and that's why they were taken captive. He realizes it's from their sin that they were then, turned into slaves, basically. And you can also find it out in First Timothy chapter 1, verse 10. 9 and 10 gives a big list of things, of people who actually need the law, the righteousness of God. And one of those people are slave traders. So the Bible's quite clear on this, make no bones about it. Slavery is a sin. And of course, this opens up the Quran, where the Quran basically says, no, it's not a sin, which it does with everything in the Bible. Of course, it turns it all on its head, and anything that is a sin in the Bible is not a sin in the Quran. And slavery is one of those things. And there are many, many verses in the Quran that, allow slavery and say there's nothing wrong with it. Surah 4 ayah 3, Surah 4 ayah 29, Surah 33 ayah 49 are just a few of the verses that say you're allowed to have smecks with your slaves. Okay, and there are two sins being committed under the law of God and in God's eyes. You've got the first sin of slavery, of course, and then you've got the second sin of adultery and sexual fornication. Okay, so there's two sins being committed there. We also find it in Surah 16, ayah 77, Surah 4, ayah 24, Surah 24, ayah 33 and 34, Surah 9, ayah 29, Surah 4, ayah 92, Surah 90, ayah 10, Surah 5, ayah 89, Surah 58, ayah 3, Surah 33, ayah 50, Surah 23, ayah 5, and Surah 70, ayah 30. Those are just a few of the verses in the Quran that allow slavery. On top of that, there are thousands of hadiths. Thousands of hadiths. All these are Bukhari, volume 5, 512, volume 7, 734, volume 7, Hadith 344, volume 7, Hadith 137, volume 5, Hadith 459, volume 3, Hadith 765, volume 5, Hadith 637, volume 5, Hadith 541. And that's just a few of the many hadiths that talk about slavery. There's also a book called Zad al-Mad, Zadalmaad, Zad al-Mad. It's by Ibn Taymiyyah and al-Jaziyah, a top scholar, not as top as me, of course, but still top scholars. And that's part 1, page 160. And that goes into all about Muhammad and his slavery, and how he had many slaves, and how he sold slaves, 2 black ones for 1 white one, and he actually purchased more slaves than what he sold. He was one of the biggest slave traders. And as I said, if you read 1 Timothy chapter 1 verse 10, according to God, selling slaves is a big sin. So Mahomo, you're a big sinner according to my Bible, selling slaves. There's also an organisation in America who do quite a lot of work on this, and they call themselves Harem Bee, HAREMBEE. They're from the Loveland Church in Los Angeles, California. So they do quite a lot of work on this. But I also have 2 books, okay, for anyone who's interested in learning more about this despicable act in Islam. There are 2 extremely good books. The first is called Slavery and Muslim Society. Slavery and Muslim Society in Africa by Alan Fisher. That's from 1971. Check the date. 1971, just 60 years ago. The second is The Slave Trade Today by Sean O'Callaghan, and that's 1961, just 70 years ago. Both these books are by these gentlemen who went to the areas, they lived in the areas, and they witnessed with their own eyes these things that took place, and they wrote them down in these books. I will warn you now, do not buy these books for your children or under 16 years old. These books are definitely for people who are over 16 years old, both of them. The first book, Slavery and Muslim Society in Africa by Alan Fisher from 1971, varies in price depending on where you go. I found it from between $23 to £144. So be very careful where you go to purchase that particular book. The cheapest site I could find it on is a site called AB Books, ABE Books, and that was for $23. The second book is cheaper, The Slave Trade Today by Sean O'Callaghan from 1961, and I found that averaging between £13 to £25. Okay, both of them are extremely good books. Both of them give you the full detail of the slave trade in Islam, and the horrors of it. And I guarantee you, there are horrors. Okay. I mean, both these books go into it in detail, and it's very disgusting, the majority of it. And don't forget, these were only 60 odd years ago. And is it still happening today? Yes, of course it is still happening today, because it comes from the Quran and the Hadiths and Muhammad himself. Okay, slavery is allowed in Islam. All right, it's a sin, so it's not allowed in Christianity. But of course, in today's society, it's very hard to not get involved in something like slavery. If you're well off, you're a Christian, you're wealthy, and you employ people, of course, that's still slavery. But of course, you're doing it in a good way, because you're helping them, giving them a living, giving them food to survive on, giving them money to survive on. And so it's a necessity in today's society. But in the eyes of God, it's still a sin, and should be avoided just like all other sins. Sadly, in Islam, it's not. In Islam, it's, you know, they're encouraged to have slaves. They're encouraged to have sex with their slaves. They're encouraged to be violent with their slaves. They're encouraged to sell their slaves. Um, all of which, as I say, is a huge big sin. And as I say, if you want to know more about it, definitely get The Slave Trade Today by Sean O'Callaghan. That's definitely the two of the cheapest of the books. And well, it will tell you all you need to know. As I say, both these gentlemen went into the areas, they lived in those areas, they witnessed it firsthand with their own eyes, and then they wrote these books, okay? Writing what they witnessed with their own eyes regarding the slave trade in many parts of Arabia. And not just from Africa, of course, but from many other areas. Because, of course, in Islam, a white slave is worth more than a blick one. So, you know, if they can go to areas where they can get white slaves, then they are quite happy to do that because they can make more money on those. But yeah, I mean, get those books if you're interested in this subject and you wish to know more regarding Islam and slavery. And both those books will give you all the information you need. Slavery and Muslim Society in Africa by Alan Fisher, 1971, the more expensive of the books. And The Slave Trade Today by Sean O'Callaghan from 1961, much cheaper to purchase, but just as informative as the other book. Both of them went there, both of them saw it, both of them witnessed not just men being bought, women being bought, little boys being bought, and little girls being bought as slaves. Yeah, and it's, as I say, informative, descriptive, and it leaves you in no doubt, you know, what these slaves are basically used for. Especially when it comes to the little boys and the little girls. You don't need a huge amount of intelligence to even work it out for yourself what the little boys and the little girls are actually being bought for, in slavery. So yeah, as I say, if you want to know more about it, The Slave Trade Today by Sean O'Callaghan, 1961, between 13 quid and 25 quid. Fair enough price. So learn up about Islam, you know, especially if you're a Muslim following Islam, learn what they do, to slaves in Islam. And is it still going on today? Yes, of course it's still going on today because it comes from the Quran. Allah is allowing Muslims to do this particular trade in slavery. Okay. God bless you all. Peace of Christ to you all. See you later on. Tiki tocky. It will be Tony Holly to begin with and then the V Vault later on. God bless you.